Conversations on race and policing began in response to the police killing of George Floyd on May 25, 2020. In this partnership between CSU San Bernardino and the Brennan Center for Justice, we hope to engage in ongoing discussions related to the history and current context of race, policing, and criminal justice with guests from diverse academic fields and backgrounds.
Welcome everybody to another installment of the Conversations on Race and Policing. It's an absolute delight today to welcome Dr. Stefan Bradley to talk about his new book, and also my colleague in history, Marc Robinson, who will be hosting the event. Amber Broaden is also joining us here. Briefly, our land acknowledgement. CSUSB acknowledges that the land on which our San Bernardino facility is sited is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mariam, commonly referred to as the Serrano people, which in contemporary era are represented by two federally recognized Indian tribes, the Yuhaviatam of San Manuel Nation and the Morongo Band of Mission Indians. Our histories and stories are intertwined in this space, and by sharing them in culturally appropriate ways, we honor and celebrate our Indigenous neighbors and partners. Since 1965, CSUSB's development has benefited from and will continue to benefit from this land's location and resources, and we recognize this. Along with this land acknowledgement, this university affirms tribal sovereignty and our responsibility to work with these tribes to further mutual respect and gratitude for all those involved. And now to introduce our guest host, I'll pass it over to Amber Broaden.
Thanks to our guest host today, our own Dr. Marc Robinson, who is an associate professor in the CSUSB History Department. He earned his PhD in American Studies from Washington State University in 2012. He joined CSUSB in 2018 and teaches courses on African American history and U.S. history. In addition to his faculty role at CSUSB, in fall of 2022, he was the visiting fellow in equity, justice, and inclusion at the University of Oregon's Clark Honors College. Among his numerous scholarly publications, Robinson's monograph, Washington State Rising: Black Power on Campus in the Pacific Northwest in 2023, was published as part of the Black Power series of New York University Press. Dr. Robinson's awards include a 2022 Mellon Emerging Faculty Leader Award and the 2021 to 2022 Outstanding Junior Faculty Award, College of Social and Behavioral Sciences at CSUSB.
All right. Well, thank you, Amber, for that introduction. And hello, everybody here with us today. We're very honored and excited to have our guest speaker. And so I'll go ahead and go into the introduction. So we are honored here, as I said, to have Professor Stefan M. Bradley. He is the Charles Hamilton Houston 15 Professor of Black Studies and History at Amherst College. Prior to that, he was the Associate Dean of Faculty Development in DEI at Loyola Marymount University. And before that, he held faculty positions at St. Louis University and Southern Illinois University. His research examines the effect of youth activism on America and American politics and policy. His latest book, titled If We Don't Get It, A People's History of Ferguson, was published in 2015. He's also the author of Upending the Ivory Tower, Civil Rights, Black Power, and the Ivy League, published in 2018, which won the Anna Julia Cooper and C.L.R. James Book Award, the History of Education Society Outstanding Book Award, and was a finalist for both the Paula Murray Book Award and the Prose Book Award. In addition, Bradley has published Harlem versus Columbia University, Black Student Power in the Late 1960s, published in 2010, which won the Phyllis Wheatley Book Prize, and he co-edited Alpha Phi Alpha, A Legacy of Greatness, The Demands of Transcendence, published in 2021. Bradley's work has been featured in the New York Times, Washington Post, Rolling Stone, and he has appeared on various outlets, including C-SPAN 2 Book TV, MSNBC, CNN, NPR, and others. Originally from Yakima, Washington, Dr. Bradley received his PhD in 20th century U.S. history with an emphasis on the Black experience from the University of Missouri, Columbia. And we are co-alumni. We both attended Washington State University. I am a native Washingtonian, as is he, and so it's an honor to have a homeboy back here with us to share your newest work. Professor Bradley, it's an honor to have you. Thank you, sir, for being here.
Hey, listen, thank you so much for taking all your good time, my Washingtonian homeboy, to introduce me. Thank you, Amber. Thank you, Jeremy. And thank you to my former good student, Michael Karp out there. He's a professor now out there. Thank you all for having me today. This is such a big deal when I get to spend time with the people that I respect and read. And so this particular series to me is vital. It's vital in this moment. At this very second, we need to hear more about the role of policing and race. And so what I'll do is maybe I'll speak for a couple minutes, and then we can get in conversation together. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about how and why I put together this most recent book, If We Don't Get It, A People's History of Ferguson by New Press. Part of the reason I put it together is, well, there's a number of different reasons. Number one is I thought it important that people who were on the ground during the time of the Ferguson uprising that occurred as a result of the state killing Michael Brown and laying him down in his own community, in his own neighborhood for 4.5 hours in Ferguson, Missouri, that somebody who was around for the uprising should write about it. And I encourage everybody who was around to write about it. But the other part of it had to do with I don't know, the advice or counsel of Chinua Achebe, who had said that until the lions have their own historians, the tales of hunting will always glorify the hunters. And so I wanted to write about the lions. I wanted to write about the lions who were fearless and fierce, the lions who were righteous. And so that was part of the reason why I took up the book. Now, it took me a long time to do it because I didn't originally want to write a book. I'm an historian and I've written about youth activism my entire career. That's been the primary topic for my career work. But I didn't want to write it because I didn't want to give the impression that I was taking some kind of financial advantage of the movement, because so much interest and attention went to the movement, and people in Ferguson are not any better off financially than they were before. And some people did take financial advantage of the movement, and I didn't want to be perceived that way. So it took me a while to finally write. But I had to come to terms with this one thing, which was that although I'm like a day 2 guy, I'm not a day 1 guy. My students were day 1. They were there to answer the call when Michael Brown was killed immediately. It took me finding out that my students were being abused by police to come out. And so that was about day 2, day 3. So we're talking about 2014, August 10th and 11th is about the time that I made it out. And so part of what I was thinking is that I was out there for a year and I protested with people, and I tried to use whatever resources I could to communicate with the world about what was happening. But my real skill is I'm a scholar. I'm an historian, and by me not writing about the movement in this kind of way, maybe I was was not sharing my real skills with the larger Black freedom movement. And so that's why I put the book together. I was able to depend on some really important new archival material. The new archive has to be, in some ways, Twitter. It has to be social media posts where these young people spoke directly to the world without any filters. I was able to use oral histories, which was helpful. I was able to depend on Black news sources and weeklies, primarily on those. And as well as, you know, a number of different secondary kinds of sources. But I was thankful to be able to do this, and I'm thankful to be here today. The main thing that I was trying to do with this book was to center the role of Black youth in a democracy movement, which is so necessary for this moment. These young Black people who had no prior experience with political activism did what so many political actors were unwilling to do, and that is to challenge the state, to confront the state in a way that they demanded democracy, they demanded freedom rights, they demanded that their their citizenship rights be recognized. And if they weren't going to be recognized, then everything would be disrupted. So the idea is if we don't get it, then we shut it down. And I was very proud of these young people who were extremely different than what we know to be as America's leadership class. They didn't look like J.D. Vance. They didn't look like the current federal administration. They look like people with dreads in their head, dreadlocks in their head, with colored braids. They look like people who had neck tattoos, who smelled like weed and sagged their pants. These were the kind of people who were leaders in a democracy movement and effective leaders. They organized and they had a great impact on the region. They had a great impact on the nation. And I think the premise of my book is that they changed the nation, that this was one of the greatest and most influential movements of the 21st century. So I wanted to make sure and feature some of these people that you may otherwise never hear of. So I'll stop talking there, and maybe we can get into a conversation or so.
Ready muted button. All right. So thank you. Yeah, thank you for the opening remarks. Yeah, let's go into a conversation. And I think, you know, as a way of continuing to get started or continuing to move forward, I wonder if we could actually take a step back a bit. And if you could maybe set the scene for us, right? So, you know, we're talking about Ferguson and St. Louis, and there was a number of factors that were going on in that community even before the tragic death of Michael Brown. So I wonder, could you maybe speak to that and just try to set the tone, you know, for our audience and for all of us to remember, you know, what was the context that then led to that spark in 2014?
Now, come on, Robinson, my good homeboy, you know better than to tell an historian to set some context. We only got a little piece of time, and so here I am thinking about, you know, well, you know, when people first arrived in what we know as St. Louis. Look, so I gotta cut that part up a little bit, and I'll fast forward. One of the things that I would say is Ferguson came about in part because of white flight, right? Because there was a desegregation movement in the city of St. Louis. White people who could afford it ended up moving out of the city, and when they did, Black people who could afford to move out of the city followed afterwards. There were other things at stake too that had to do with the idea of America's housing issues when you know, you had these government funding structures, housing structures, call them projects. When St. Louis and when the state decided to destroy some of these high-rise projects, the people who lived in those places went out to North County, St. Louis, to a suburb called Ferguson. And they went to live out there. So Ferguson ended up being, by 2014, maybe two-thirds Black, as a residential area. It was a situation where, although it was 2/3 Black, Black people were greatly underrepresented in terms of the democracy. On the city council, maybe there was one Black person on the entire city council. In the police force, there were maybe 54 officers, 52 of which happened not to be Black. At various levels, it was tough. The school that Mike Brown attended was unaccredited. Where he graduated high school from was unaccredited. Ferguson was one of some 90-some municipalities in the St. Louis area. This is important to note because these municipalities all have to figure out a way to create revenue so that they can survive. Ferguson has its own mayor, and it's a few miles outside of St. Louis City. Well, one of the ways that it created revenue was through tickets and fining, traffic tickets. This was probably one of the best cases of racial capitalism that could be displayed in the 21st century. The city of Ferguson would make an incredible amount of money on pulling over largely and in a majority Black motorists, and the maybe 90% of the tickets and fines and arrests that were made were of Black motorists, and they would stack up these tickets, and they'd say, well, you have to come to court, and the court would be open till like 5 p.m. and you couldn't bring kids in the court. If you didn't come to court, then you got a warrant for your arrest, and so essentially there was the creation of certain kinds of pauper prisons in places like Ferguson. And so this was part of the issues that created, I guess you could say, tinder and fuel for the reaction that was made with Mike Brown. I think that's the local context, Professor Robinson, but the national context, of course, you would have to think about Trayvon Martin. There's an image of Trayvon Martin behind my shoulder here. You would have to think about Jordan Davis. You would have to think about Eric Garner. All of those things were happening at the same time or just before Mike Brown was killed by Darren Wilson, killed, some yards away from his apartment. So that was the context that I think I tried to shorten it for you, homeboy. I tried to get you there. Yeah.
Appreciate it. I think that was great. I wonder, maybe could you say just a little bit more about racial capitalism and pauper prison? I just want to make sure, in case anyone is not familiar with those terms, you could maybe just elaborate just a little bit.
Yeah, the city of Ferguson found a way to make money off of marginalizing and focusing on issuing fines of largely Black people. There's no way statistically that Black people drive that badly. Like it's freakonomics. Like you can't, statistically, it's impossible. However, what the federal government found is there was a pattern and practice of the Ferguson Police Department essentially picking on these Black motorists. That created the revenue for the municipality to survive, to thrive. And so they would use that money for the municipality. And so Black people were being taxed on one end and then taxed on the other end because of the fines. In that way, they were using capitalism to punish these Black people, but they were also using racism to operate capitalism. And so that's where we have this racial capitalism occurring. This idea of a pauper prison is this, that you go to jail because you can't afford to pay your fine. This is one of the most ignorant things I've ever heard of in my life. The idea that if I could afford to pay my fine, then I would stay out of jail. But the way that they had it worked out is if you can afford to pay your fines, and they would stack up these tickets 2, 3 at a time, then you would have to go spend time in jail. Now, in jail, you'd have to still pay your fine later on, but then pay for being in jail. And so this whole thing, this was a system set up for nobody to succeed, except for the state and the carceral system.
Right. Gotcha. So we have this system where, in addition to the harassment and being stopped by the police and potentially maybe insulted or treated rudely, or the kind of interaction that would happen, then there's the financial exploitation that's happening on top of that. That's sort of reinforcing all of these issues of poverty and issues of frustration that's happening. So it's all that. I think you're painting a very good kind of representation for us. So then take us to the actual Mike Brown incident. It's been a few years now. There's been so many of these incidents. Unfortunately, this long history. I think for our audience, it would be useful just to have a reminder on what were the details of what happened on the day Mike Brown was killed.
Yeah. Would have been the day of August 9th, 2014. And Mike Brown was 18 years old at the time. He had graduated from high school about a month before. He and his friend Dorian Johnson had gone by a confectionery or convenience store. Mike Brown had a bit of a confrontation with somebody at the store. Mike Brown walked out without paying for some cigarillos, small cigars, and was walking back to his apartment in the Canfield Green apartment complex on Canfield Drive in Ferguson. That was when Ferguson police officer Darren Wilson, who happened to be a white police officer, pulled up on Dorian Johnson and Mike Brown and told them to get out of the middle of the street. These being 18-year-old boys, young men, they had some words about what they intended to do and how they intended to do it. They intended to walk in the street. And that's where a verbal confrontation occurred between Mike Brown and Officer Darren Wilson. From there, Darren Wilson claims that there was a physical confrontation that occurred where Darren Wilson would say that he feared for his life. Darren Wilson ended up letting off 12 rounds and shooting Mike Brown through with 5 or 6 of those rounds, killing him. There were witnesses who claimed that Mike Brown had his hands up at one point or another, and that became one of the rallying cries: hands up, don't shoot. The issue is this, that the Canfield Green apartment complex, there's not many ways into the complex. It's like one way in. And it was August in Missouri. And so you kind of have to know, the Midwest, and you have to know Missouri to understand what this meant. That it was 100% humidity. It was almost 100 degrees. And so people are outside because to be inside, you might be baking if you didn't have an air conditioning system. And so it's kids all around. They left that boy's body in the street, bleeding out, without any sheets, without any covers, without anything, where little kids could see his body, where his family members could see his body. His mother, they wouldn't let his mother go and see the body when she finally arrived. And so this is what it looked like on August 9th. The first people to put out a hue and cry happened to be like mothers and grandmothers. Those were the first people to start protesting. When they did, some of the what America might call thugs went out to protect their grandmothers and mothers and aunties when the police decided to mobilize police dogs and to mobilize militarized equipment in response to these publicly grieving Black people. So I hope that sets the scene for you.
It does, yeah. And I think it's also important to note, as you do in the book, that the confrontation between this officer and Mike Brown and his friend had nothing to do with the earlier incident at the the local store, potential taking of an item without paying. The officer later acknowledged that he didn't know about that there wasn't no call for backup, there wasn't anything. This confrontation happened totally separate from that, and so it later was used as a justification to say, oh, well, there was this crime that occurred, but actually they weren't really related.
No. Yeah, and that's troublesome because, like, see, do you see how like the carceral system and how the state has us trying to even make justifications for that? What if he did? What if he did steal the cigarillos? The boy should be alive. Well, he should be a man at this point. Like, he should still be alive. That's not the police's job to execute people for stealing things or for having confrontations with them. That's part of the job. And but there was a whole heap of people, conservatives, making the case that the boy deserved to die, the young man deserved to die because of these situations. So it's frustrating, Professor Robinson.
Indeed. And then the part about his body being left there for hours, really did contribute to the outrage that we saw. The fact that he was murdered was bad enough, but the disrespect and so forth, the callousness that we saw there. So now I'd like you to shift a little bit and talk about how, from what I understand, it was your students and it was your role as a faculty member, in addition to your other kind of community work, that led you to get involved. And so I wonder, could you maybe tell us about what you were doing at the time, as a professor, and how that connected to what was happening, on the grassroots and in the street?
Sure. Thank you for the question. Look, I'm not typically given to demonstrating in the street. I wasn't at that point given to demonstrating in the street. Hey, listen, I tell people, I represent the bougie faction. A life member of the NAACP and, fraternity man and all that kind of stuff. Like, I try to work with youth, with young people. I tried to work through the system and that sort of thing. And if I had problems before, I'd be like, let me send this note to my legislator, and that sort of thing. Or let me lodge my dismay, and do it that way. But so I wasn't the fist pumping kind. That wasn't necessarily me. The issue came to a head though when I received a call from my student telling me that another student of mine had been tear gassed, pepper sprayed, and shot with rubber pellets. This was on the night of August 10th, I believe it was, August 9th or August 10th. And all I heard was shot. And so this was the middle of the night, and so I started reaching for my pants and my knife, and I was like, "Where are you?" And the student was like, "No. The student who had been pepper sprayed and shot with rubber pellets, his partner at the time, who is now an alderwoman in St. Louis, literally carried him to safety, carried him to another mentor's house." And there they tried to figure out how to get the pepper spray off of his skin and out of his eyes. And nobody knew how to do it. And so his partner went to Twitter and asked, how do you neutralize the effects of pepper spray and tear gas? And somebody from Palestine responded, milk. And this was important. And I take this as symbolic because this, to my mind, meant that this was the start of a movement that fit into the larger world movement for liberation. So I was eventually able to talk to the mentor where my student was, and he said that the boy was safe now, but that I could hear the boy crying, my student crying in the background. The young man said that my student said that it felt like having a sore and pouring hot sauce and salt on it, is what he said. And so that student had to go work as a resident assistant the next day on campus. So I was at St. Louis University. I was in the Department of History, and I was the director of the Black Studies program. And so I begged and pleaded with both the student who called me and the student who had been harmed and his partner who was also coming to St. Louis University. I begged and pleaded with them not to go back out there because it was dangerous, because I thought they were going to get shot and killed like Mike Brown got shot and killed. And I didn't want that. And so I pleaded with them. I begged with them. They said, Professor Bradley, you taught us about the Black Freedom Movement. And so we're going out to protest. And so when I couldn't convince them, I decided, well, at least I'll go be with them. Not that I could protect them, but if something happened, then I'd at least be there with them. And so I went out the next day with them, and we stayed out there for almost a year on the street. And they were much braver than me. I'm not gonna tell you I'm a frontliner. I'm not gonna tell you that I'm courageous. None of those things, because I ran from the armored police vehicles. When they popped tear gas, I tried to run away. I didn't want to be arrested, any of those things. But they did. They got arrested. They organized actions. They stood in the face of fear, and I was so proud of them. And they deserve to be followed. So that's how I got out there. That's how things shook down for some of my students.
Wow, that's a very powerful story, and to be an educator who's willing to step out of the classroom and to really have those genuine relationships with students is quite commendable. So thank you for sharing that and giving us a glimpse of your relationships with your students. I think it's also fascinating to think about your larger argument that now that we've had this context and we see how you got involved, you're arguing in your book that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the Ferguson uprising is both a project that is sort of reforming or reclamating democracy, as well as it's a moment that is the start of a new civil rights movement or a new, Black freedom movement. So I wonder if you could maybe sort of say more about one or both of those points and really help us to understand, how you make those arguments, which are a very bold assertion.
Yeah. And I don't back down from either one of those. Like, I think what we saw in Ferguson was by far the best civics lesson that could ever be taught. Young people in Ferguson started to realize, oh, yeah, we know what the police do, but we also get to find out what a city manager does. We also get to find out what a city planner does. We also get to find out what a city attorney does. We get to find out what the state legislature is for. And these are important aspects of being a citizen. But more than anything is perhaps innately, they knew that they had a right to assemble. They knew that they had a right to use their voices. They had a right to protest. But what they were denied was the ability to do all of these things, with the police instituting rules like the 5-second rule, where you couldn't stand in place on a sidewalk, on a publicly paid for sidewalk. You couldn't stand in place for longer than 5 seconds. You had to keep moving. Well, young people understood that that's anti-democratic at best, and at worst authoritarian. And so they were able to protest against these kinds of things. People in the neighborhood understood that police telling you to get back in your house and get off your own yard or get off your own lawn, that's not supposed to be American. And if anybody else was treated like this in another part of the world, they would call that an anti-democratic and authoritarian state. And so these young people were able to draw this out. And they were able to follow up. So they were able to go from protest to politics, where they were able to vote in the city attorney that they wanted, where they were able to vote in eventually the mayor that they wanted, where they were able to run for office themselves and participate in the democracy. This was super important because this is not anything that was on the minds of a lot of these young people. They weren't interested in politics before. These were the young people that saw Obama be elected to president and then saw and then get tear gassed in their own neighborhoods. So they were radicalized in a certain kind of way. So I think they going out and explaining what should be able to happen with your freedom rights, that they should be respected, was in a sense their efforts at rescuing democracy. And in the book, I referred to them as young Democrats. That is small d Democrats, not capital D Democrats, small d Democrats, where they were doing the work of the democracy project. And that was very important to me, very important.
Okay. And then in terms of a new Black freedom movement,
Yeah.
another thing that some people may say, well, I don't know, maybe it was an important moment, but make the
Yeah.
case for a movement here.
Yeah. And that was the issue on the ground. Is this a moment or a movement? Well, look here. This is the way I see it is the young people, some of whom I interviewed, lived on the ground. I'm not talking about protested on the ground. I'm saying they were homeless and stayed out in front of the police station, the Ferguson police station, for a year in tents on the ground. Like this was for a year. This wasn't a matter of weeks or anything like this. When you think about the Montgomery bus boycott, that lasted for a year, right? You're in a place where we talk about Black studies and that sort of thing. The students at San Francisco State College, they protested for 5 months, right? These young people were committed to this, and they organized amongst themselves. They created their own organizations, and they relied on some established organizations. They were able to garner resources themselves, and they were able to flip these organizations into the type of entities that could affect politics. So by affecting politics, you had now politicians talking about poverty and talking about race and policing. That was not happening before. I can assure you that. Even with Trayvon Martin, you didn't see people rise up in that way around Trayvon Martin. Now, you had the establishment after Trayvon Martin's death of Black Lives Matter, but Black Lives Matter wasn't a real movement when Ferguson went up. Ferguson gave power and wind to what would be known as the Black Lives Matter movement. And they were two separate things because there is no chapter of Black Lives Matter in St. Louis, to be sure. So I would say that they influenced politics at that point, where you had Hillary Clinton having to answer about this. You had people like so many different politicians having to answer to the policing that was going on at the moment, but also you had a cultural movement where everybody wanted to holler out Black Lives Matter and everything else, and there was a reverberation with all of this too. That is, I don't think you would get Trump if it weren't for what these young people did in Ferguson, because Trump used it as a campaign, a campaigning rally. And so many others did as well. You had that AstroTurf Blue Lives Matter movement because of Ferguson. So this faux affection for police and policing sprouted because of this. So I would say yes, that it was a movement. You could not possibly, not in any way, fashion, or form, and I stand on this with all 10 toes, have the racial reckoning of 2020 without Ferguson going up. Ferguson preceded what happened in Baltimore, what happened in Dallas, and all these other places. And so it was the catalyst for this movement that brought on all of these jobs, that brought on all of the DEI hiring and jobs for myself included. So yeah, I say it was a movement, and I'd be glad to argue with anybody about that.
Uh, Let me give a chance for my co-panelists to jump back in if there are any comments or questions from the Q&A or from my panelists. I just want to pause for a moment.
Absolutely. I'd love to jump back in. Amazing and brilliant discussion, Dr. Bradley. there's a few things that I wanted to affirm from what you shared, and maybe provide some questions as well. But one thing that I really appreciated you highlighting in the beginning of your presentation was the fact that the leaders of this democracy movement would fit the national stereotype of Black identity. But what they were doing was such impactful and beautiful work, right? Really being at the front lines. And standing up for the change that we wanted to see. And when I was at Howard University, I had a chance to meet one of the young ladies who was an alumni, but who was actually born and raised in Ferguson and was also in the front lines. And her name was Maya Atten White.
Sure.
And are you familiar with her?
Yeah, I've heard of
Yeah.
name. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and she was a woman that was essentially shot in the head during these protests in 2014 and survived.
Mhm.
So she has gone on to speak publicly about the experience, right? And the tragedy that
Yeah.
was the protest at that point. And so there's a, excuse me, as I was mentioning to Marc earlier, there's like this duality within the Black experience where, we're doing the work, but then another side is using our work to fuel a protest or incite further rage, right? Which I think is interesting to navigate. But I think I wanted to ask you, when you were writing this book, was it difficult to separate the emotion from
Mm.
displaying the facts and the truth of the matter? What kind of delicate dance or play was going on with that?
Mm. Yes, my psychologist colleague, friend, yeah, no, and thank you for the question, Professor Broughton. Yeah, it was difficult. Like, and I can't explain it to you all so well just with my words, but like, think about it in these terms. The people that I was interviewing, and myself included, uh, like you would go home smelling like tear gas, right? Like some of the people that I talked to would have night terrors and nightmares about what the police were doing. They would some of the people that I interviewed literally had nervous breakdowns. Okay, nervous breakdown and such psychological injury that from that point forward they would have to take medications to help stabilize. Like, I don't think I can explain to everybody what it feels like to know that tonight we almost died. Like we almost died. Like and for these young people to still keep coming out and to confront police. And so the refrain back then was hands up, don't shoot. These are people who didn't have any weapons, faced off against people who had the most lethal weapons on earth, right? And so psychologically, it was very, very traumatic in a way. And so when writing this, I can get all of the feelings back. I can get all the feelings back. So one of the things that I never tried to do is to pretend that I wasn't biased in writing this book. And so I thought that would be a fool's errand to try to pretend that my positionality allowed me to be what do you call it? Totally objective and that sort of thing. No, no, it's not that. It's not that. I'm right in most of what I say. I'm right. There might be some small trivial issues or whatever, but I have a point of view, and the people that I interviewed, the people that whose words I used from their posts, they have points of view, and I'm on the side of Mike Brown should still be alive. That's the side I'm on. And I'm on the side of we're supposed to have a democracy where even if somebody steals cigarillos, even if somebody has confrontation with police, that they're supposed to be given their day in court and supposed to be dealt with in that way. And that makes me oppositional to some people who feel like that when Black people don't comply, they should die. I'm not with that, and I hope I make it clear in the book. I'm not with that, and so it was like I said, going through a lot of emotions when writing the book and having to hear again the trauma that so many people faced. It was difficult, and trauma's on different levels. By the way, I'm gonna say this real quickly because we're running out of time. But trauma's on different levels. Like these are people who already had traumas. Like a lot of these people grew up in poverty and didn't have much of anything, and now they're fighting for freedom, and that sort of thing. And they're fighting each other because they have different ideas, and they're young people, and they don't back down, and so they're losing friends. They lost their jobs, they lost their houses, they are not eating right. They're taking things to make them feel better so that they can get on level. And so there was a lot of emotional damage because of this. And there was other situations where people are fighting the patriarchy at the same time as fighting racism. And so queer people are having troubles. Women are having troubles being recognized as leaders, even though they were in the front lines. So it was so many different things that I tried to capture in the book that I hope people will be able to pick up on.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you mentioned a lot of great things. Thank you for that question, Dr. Brodin, and for the answer, Dr. Bradley. I think we are coming to the end of our session, and so unfortunately, I'm sure we could go on. I mean, it's a fascinating conversation, and definitely more that we could say. I guess maybe as a way of coming to a close, if there aren't any questions in the Q&A, Dr. Broad, help me out if I'm not seeing any.
We're
All
good.
right,
Yeah.
got the thumbs up.
Mhm.
So maybe as a way of concluding, I wonder, a lot of, as you said at the beginning, Dr. Bradley, and what you've been saying, you're really trying to celebrate and highlight, young people, their potential, their leadership. I wonder, as a closing thought, what do you really want us to remember and take away from this book in regards to our youth and the people who have the neck tattoos, the people who are in college, and everybody in between, or people who may be both, right? Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what you see as the main takeaway in that regard.
Yeah, I think the main takeaway is it might be better to listen to these young people, particularly the most disaffected, marginalized young people, to listen to them and to understand where they're coming from before they get to the point where they feel like they want to break something or burn something. So it's just cheaper that way. So for all of my conservative friends, invest in these young people on the front end, or you'll invest in new windows and higher insurance policies on the back end. So I think that's one way to think about things. I think another way to think about things is I'm hoping that America is able to reframe and reconceptualize its ideas of who should be a leader. Because I'm talking about queer people, non-binary people. I'm talking about people who aren't formally educated. They were able to understand in the moment and on the fly what was necessary for the democracy to live. And I think that that's important to me. Like that's important. I think another thing that I would want people to get from this is you cannot allow a police state like that. That's not going to function well for healthy communities. So one of the things that we didn't know precisely what we were doing. So we were out there protesting for body cams and this kind of stuff. Well, it turns out that they just kill people on camera now and get away with it. We're, protesting for so many different things that it didn't work out right. We wanted more police on the more black police on the police force. Well, it turns out that black police also arrest people at unsavory rates. Arrest black people at unsavory rates. So some of the things that we thought about back then, maybe we had to evolve on later on. And I would want people to think about, like, what is the role of policing? Like, if we're going to keep policing, then should we allow police to operate like gangs with masks on their face and lethal weapons and be able to snatch people, become body snatchers? if we're going to have policing in a place like Ferguson, should the police have to live in Ferguson, or can you live elsewhere in an all-white town or city and then pull up to Ferguson, arrest Black people, and then go back to your all-white space? So in your mind, psychologically, Professor Brodden, I just know Black people to be potentially criminalistic. That's how I know Black people. So those are the things that I want people to think about. But I also want to think about this last thing. I also want you to think about the potential of young people. So these young people who weren't interested in politics before have ended up being state representatives and alderwomen and some of these people ended up becoming U.S. Congress people like Cori Bush. And that to me is recognizing the potential and allowing for the potential to unfurl. So if we're going to judge everybody by how they acted at 17, 18-year-olds, then throw away the whole project, because these young people were able to mature into excellent super citizens. And that's kind of the book project that I wanted to put forward.
All right, wonderful. Well, again, the book is, right, if we don't get it, People's History of Ferguson. Stefan M. Bradley, Professor, sir, it's been an honor to have you. Thank you for coming and sharing your work with us. And best of luck on the book and your next project.
Thank you. And thank you for this series. Look, you all have been keeping us educated for a good while. What is this? Since 16 or 17? How long have you been doing this? Yeah, it's been a while.
2020.
2020. Okay. All right. Thank you for your work. We need you. We need you badly. And I mean right now. So thank you so much.
Conversations on Race and Policing has been supported by funding from the California State University San Bernardino College of Social and Behavioral Sciences, Faux Library, and the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Finn Lee is our technical consultant. Pamela Crossan provides administrative support, and Alan Yavor provides communication support. There's more information in the show notes, and please join us online at csusb.edu/CORP for upcoming programming and to find our catalog of over 100 past events with guests like Robin D.G. Kelly, Jamal Bowman, Dorothy Roberts, and many more.